Why was she standing in the rain, long after the others had gone? The courtyard outside the briefing hall was empty, but she hadn't moved. The night air pressed down, heavy and wet, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Her boots were caked with mud. Her fingers trembled against the rifle strap at her shoulder. She was waiting for something, or maybe avoiding it. Inside, the lights had gone out one by one. Officers, men twice her age, filed away with clipped voices and tired faces. No one looked her in the eye when they passed. No one asked why she lingered. She didn't blame them. In truth, she didn't want to be seen. Because there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. The mission had been spelled out in cold sentences and maps spread across the long oak table. A compound, high in the mountains, guarded by men who wanted the world to believe they were untouchable. Intelligence said the target would be there, for one night only. A name whispered in corridors for months. A man who had ordered the deaths of innocents, who had slipped through every trap. Tonight the trap would close, and she was part of the trigger. Her name was Captain Leila Marquez. Most knew her as a quiet one, the woman who didn't raise her voice in arguments, who seemed to fade into corners at social gatherings. But in silence, she carried storms. Her shadow on the wet ground was her only companion now, stretching long and thin in the dim floodlight. She stared at it, wondering if tomorrow it would even exist. A memory broke through, her sister's voice. "Don't ever let them see you scared, Lay." That had been years ago, in a kitchen that smelled of coffee and burnt toast, a morning before her sister boarded a bus she would never return on, the bus that exploded in a marketplace. The news had shown images. She hadn't watched them. She couldn't. Every step since had been a response. Every training exercise, every scar, every sleepless night. She wasn't just here because of orders. She was here because the war had already taken her family, and if she didn't act, it would keep taking. But no one in that briefing room knew the full reason she'd volunteered, not even the commander. The rain thickened, beating harder on her shoulders. She pulled her hood over her hair and finally turned, forcing herself back inside. The barracks smelled of damp uniforms and boot polish. A few of the younger soldiers were stretched on their bunks, staring at phones, listening to music too loud through cheap earbuds. They glanced at her, then looked away quickly. Some respected her, some resented her, none really knew her. She kept walking until she reached her own narrow bunk at the far end. Sat down, let the rifle lean against the wall. Her fingers were raw from cleaning it earlier, but she picked up the cloth again as if ritual might steady her breathing. Across from her, Corporal Hayes, barely 21, was sketching in a notebook. He was always drawing mountains, birds, faces. She wondered if he sketched them to remember or to escape. He noticed her looking and smiled nervously. "Ma'am, you ever draw?" Leila shook her head. "I used to," she admitted softly, surprising herself. "Stopped a long time ago." He nodded, like he understood without needing explanation. Then he went back to shading a line, his pencil scratching quietly in rhythm with the rain on the roof. Small moments like that, they mattered. They reminded her these weren't just bodies lined up for orders. They were people carrying their own ghosts. Hayes had a tattoo on his wrist, initials of someone. She'd seen him touch it before missions. Everyone had someone. Everyone had a reason. But not everyone made peace with theirs. Hours bled away. Sleep didn't come. Instead, the silence filled with thoughts she couldn't shut off. What if she missed the shot? What if someone didn't make it home because of her hesitation? What if the mission succeeded and still nothing inside her changed? At 400, the alarm sounded. The barracks came alive with motion, boots hitting floors, straps tightening, the metallic click of rifles being checked. The low hum of engines outside. Leila rose with the rest, movements practiced, automatic. But inside, her chest burned with something far less mechanical. Fear. Not of dying. She had accepted that long ago. It was the fear of being forgotten. of becoming another unmarked name on a list, her story reduced to dates and rank. As she stepped into the night, a voice called out behind her. "Captain!" It was Major Rourke, grizzled, gray-stubbled, eyes lined by decades. He walked with a limp from an injury long ago, but his presence carried weight. "You've got steady hands," he said simply. "That'll matter tonight." He didn't linger, didn't offer false comfort, just a statement. But it stayed with her even as she climbed into the helicopter and the blades thundered above. The city lights fell away beneath them, replaced by rolling dark mountains. Wind howled through the cabin. Faces were hidden behind goggles and helmets, but she knew the thoughts running behind them, each person fighting their own war inside. She closed her eyes and felt the vibration of the metal seat, tried to picture her sister's smile, tried not to think about the blast. The pilot's voice crackled over comms, 5 minutes out. Everyone tensed, fingers flexed, breath slowed. And in that moment, with the target compound waiting in the black horizon, Leila realized something. The shadow she carried wasn't just hers. It belonged to every person she had lost, every person these men had lost, every civilian who had begged for a future and been denied. It wasn't a burden, it was a witness. And tonight, that shadow would follow her into history's greatest fight. Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Leila Marquez sat at the edge of the room, uniform crisp but eyes tired, fingers drumming against the table. She could feel them watching, colleagues, officers, strangers, yet the weight wasn't accusation. It was doubt. They didn't know her. They didn't know what she had survived. She glanced at the mission board. Red markers, lines of movement, satellite photos blurred with annotations, numbers and coordinates that meant everything. And yet it felt distant. A plan written in ink, sterile, detached from the chaos of what she would actually face. The major cleared his throat. "Captain Marquez, you're up." She pushed herself into the seat, forcing her expression calm. But inside, nerves buzzed like a live wire. She had faced worse storms, gunfire, the cold weight of silence after a teammate didn't return, but this was different. This was preparation. The calm before descent into a fire she already feared. "Intel suggests the compound is lightly defended," he said, pointing to a satellite image. "But recent movement indicates they've taken precautions. We need infiltration, surveillance, and extraction." Leila's eyes narrowed on a figure in the image, a man whose presence had haunted their last mission. She swallowed hard, remembering the helicopter flight, the explosion, the boy. The memory prickled at the back of her mind. Hesitation could cost lives. Again. The room murmured. Some officers whispered to each other. A few glanced her way with thinly veiled skepticism. She felt the burn of being underestimated. "Understood," she said softly, voice steady. "I'll lead the reconnaissance team. Timing and discretion are critical." A pause. Then a lieutenant muttered almost under his breath, "You froze last time. Hope this is a repeat." Leila's jaw tightened. Her shadow seemed to stretch across the table as if to guard her. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Every heartbeat said enough. After the briefing, she walked to the hangar. The team gathered there. Hayes, the quiet artist soldier with a wounded arm she'd helped patch last mission. Two new operatives, unknown but competent. And Rourke, silent as always, studying every detail like a hawk. The helicopter blades churned the air. Dust swirled around boots. Leila's hands rested on her rifle, checking the mechanism with meticulous care. Every click, every slide was a prayer to precision. Hayes sidled up beside her. "You think they really trust us?" he asked quietly. Leila didn't look at him. She could feel the doubt pressing from every angle. Trust isn't given. It's earned in the field. He nodded, staring out into the desert. "I'm glad you're with me. I'd rather have your shadow than anyone else." Her lips quirked briefly, almost a smile. Shadows, always following. They had carried her through firefights, through silence, through choices she wished she could undo. The helicopter lifted, engines screaming. The base shrank below them. The desert spread endlessly, gold and white, unyielding. Leila's eyes never left the horizon. Every peak, every ridge held potential danger. Every gust of wind could mask the approach of death. Hours passed. The team monitored their coordinates, adjusting silently. No one spoke more than necessary. The hum of the helicopter, the rush of air, and the distant bird cries were their soundtrack. They approached the target area. Leila's gut tightened. The compound sat in a bowl of mountains, walls high, shadows deep. Sensors indicated a guard presence, but numbers were uncertain. The boy, the man. The memory prickled in her chest again, a warning, a tether. "Recon team, prepare for insertion," she whispered. Hayes moved beside her, steady. Rourke followed, as always, calm but alert. The two new operatives checked their rifles, helmets, eyes scanning. Every movement synchronized, rehearsed in silence. The helicopter hovered above a ridge. Leila took in the wind, the drop, the shadows. The rope slid down, slick with condensation. She glanced at Hayes. His fingers trembled slightly, but he met her eyes with quiet resolve. "Together," she said. They descended, ropes creaking, muscles straining. Every second felt eternal. The air was thin, each breath a fight, each heartbeat a reminder of fragility. Touching ground, they melted into the shadows. The compound loomed. Movement flickered behind walls. Guards, the man, somewhere in the chaos, the child. Leila crouched low, every sense alert. The team spread out, every step calculated, every shadow a possible threat. The desert's chill pressed against her skin, but her mind burned with urgency. They reached a side wall. Leila signaled for cover. Rourke moved first, testing for tripwires, listening for the hum of alarms. Hayes followed, slow, deliberate, but steady. Inside, silence waited like a predator. Leila's ears caught the faintest movement, a footstep, a whispered command, the boy's voice perhaps. She froze, finger on the trigger. Every memory clawed at her. She could not fail, not again. Hours slipped past, patrols moved. She guided the team, counting, timing, breathing with them. Every wrong step could unravel everything. Then a glint of light caught her eye, steel, careful, deliberate. The man, her stomach dropped. He moved near a doorway unaware. She signaled, the team froze, time slowed. The memory of failure pressed down, heavier than the walls. Hayes whispered, "We can do this, together." Leila nodded, shadow and resolve intertwined. They moved forward, silent, precise, every muscle tense, every breath measured. The corridor narrowed, guards passed near. The child stayed hidden in a corner, unaware. Leila's heart ached. Hesitation was no longer an option. Her finger hovered. The tension was unbearable. The team held their breath. The man paused, glanced around. He did not see them. Then a door clicked. A guard emerged. Her team struck, swift and silent. Leila's rifle barked once, controlling. The courtyard beyond awaited. Their objective was just ahead. The man, the child, the culmination of months of preparation. And yet, as they advanced, Leila's heart carried both the weight of the past and the hope of the present. Every step forward was a promise. This time, she would not hesitate. Why was the boy standing there, barefoot, in the courtyard of a fortress that should have been crawling with killers? Leila kept her scope trained, but her chest tightened. He couldn't have been older than 10. A thin shirt clung to his frame, and the cold mountain air made him shiver violently. He wasn't carrying anything, no weapon, no signal flare. Just a child alone at an hour when no child should be awake. Her breath fogged against the eyepiece. "Command, I've got a civilian," she whispered into comms, her voice tight. "Male, juvenile, courtyard, standing still." Static filled her ear before the reply came, sharp, clipped. "Copy, Overwatch. Civilian presence confirmed. Hold your fire." But the words didn't ease the tension. Because if there was a child here, either the intel was wrong or worse, the enemy was using him as a shield. Down below, shadows moved her squad, inching closer to the outer wall. Major Rourke glanced back toward her perch, as if he could feel her unease even through layers of rock and night. His gesture was small, a subtle lowering of his hand. Steady. Don't break. She tried, God, she tried. But her mind betrayed her. The boy blurred with another image. Her sister's boy, her nephew. The last time she saw him was at his birthday, a cake too big for their small table, candles that refused to blow out. He'd laughed so hard he fell sideways. That was before the bus, before the fire. Her throat burned. She blinked hard, forced the memory back into its box. This wasn't him. This wasn't family. This was war. Overwatch status. Rourke's voice came low in her ear. Her finger tightened against the trigger. Still visual, still clear. And then movement. Two armed men emerged from the compound, their rifles slung casual as though they didn't fear being watched. They walked past the boy without even glancing at him. One lit a cigarette. The other spat on the ground. They looked bored, almost expectant. It didn't make sense. Leila's pulse hammered. She adjusted the scope, scanning windows, rooftops, alleyways. No extra guards, no patrols. Just two men, a child, and silence thick enough to choke on. She whispered, "It's too easy." Rourke didn't answer, but she knew he felt it too. The breach team reached the wall. Charges were placed in silence, hands moving with precision. A last glance between them, the kind of look soldiers give when they know it might be the last. 3, 2, 1. The explosion split the night. Dust and rock sprayed into the air. Shadows surged forward. Boots thundered against stone. Shouts in a foreign tongue erupted inside the compound. Leila locked her scope on the doorway, breath synced to her heartbeat. She scanned for threats, for shapes breaking through the dust. A figure appeared, rifle raised. Her shot cracked, the man dropped. Another sprinted from the shadows, muzzle flashing. She exhaled, squeezed, he fell. Each pull of the trigger was a decision, final and irreversible, and each one carved deeper into her chest. She told herself it was justice. She told herself it was necessary, but in the silence after the shot, the lies sounded thinner. Through the scope, she caught sight of the boy again. He hadn't run. He hadn't screamed. He stood frozen, wide-eyed, watching the firefight unfold around him. And for a heartbeat, Leila wondered, did he even know which side he should fear? Overwatch shift north, window. Her body reacted before thought. She swung the rifle, spotted the glint of a barrel in the upper window and fired. Glass shattered. The man collapsed backward. The team poured into the compound now, weapons sweeping rooms, voices barking commands. Leila could hear it all through comms, clear. Stairs, contact right, the chaos of a building being taken piece by piece. But her role didn't end. She was the silent net around them, eyes in the dark. Her muscles ached from the stillness, but she didn't move. Her finger hovered ready. Her breath stayed shallow, measured. And then she saw it. A door at the far end of the courtyard, half hidden in shadow. It opened slowly. A man stepped out, tall, bearded, dressed in civilian clothes that couldn't hide the hardness in his posture. Not a guard, not a villager, someone else. He placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy didn't flinch. Leila's stomach turned cold. She raised her scope, focused on the man's face. Recognition jolted through her. She'd seen him before. Not in person, but in the grainy photographs passed around briefings. The man the world had been chasing. The ghost who had sent others to die while he hid. The reason this mission existed. Target confirmed. Her heart should have surged with relief. Instead, it sank, because he wasn't running. He wasn't resisting. He was standing calmly with a child under his hand, daring them to act. And in that instant, the battlefield twisted. If she fired, she might kill them both. If she hesitated, he might vanish again, slip through shadows, start the cycle anew. Her finger trembled against the trigger. Overwatch, do you have eyes? Rourke's voice cut in. strained with the chaos of close-quarters combat inside the compound. She opened her mouth but no sound came. The scope wavered, her chest tightened. Yes, she had eyes, but what she saw wasn't just a man. It was her sister's killer. It was every loss folded into flesh. And it was a child who didn't deserve to pay for sins he couldn't understand. The crosshairs hovered. Her shadow lay long across the rocks. And for the first time tonight, Captain Leila Marquez didn't know if she had the strength to pull the trigger. What did it mean to hesitate, in a world where seconds could decide life or death? Leila's finger hovered over the trigger, her scope locked on the man whose name had haunted every mission file for months. He stood calm, one hand resting on the boy's narrow shoulder. The child's eyes reflected the faint orange glow of fire from the breached compound. Innocence framed against cruelty. Her breath caught. She had a shot clean, centered, but the shadow of her sister's boy flickered across her vision. And in that flicker, the trigger turned to stone. Overwatch status. Major Rourke's voice broke against her ear, raw with urgency. Gunfire rattled behind him, men shouting as they cleared the compound room by room. "Do you have him?" Leila swallowed hard, unable to answer. Her silence stretched dangerous. The man seemed to know. He tilted his head slightly, almost smiling. Then he raised his free hand, slow, deliberate, not in surrender but in command. From the shadows of the courtyard, figures emerged. 6, 7, more, all armed, rifles raised, moving with lethal purpose. Her blood ran cold. "It's a trap," she whispered, finally breaking the silence. They were waiting. Gunfire erupted instantly. Bullets chewed the courtyard stone, sparks flying. Rourke cursed over comms, barking orders as his men scrambled for cover. Hayes's voice broke through, high and panicked. "Contact left, multiple, we're pinned." Leila reacted before thought. Her rifle barked once, twice, 3 times. Each shot dropped a figure closing in on the breach team. She shifted, fired again, muzzle flash lighting the rocks around her. The world narrowed to crosshairs and targets, her finger a metronome of violence. But the man, the target, didn't run. He stood rooted, calm, shielded by the child at his side. Every instinct screamed at her to take the shot. Every memory screamed back that pulling the trigger would make her no different than him. A burst of gunfire dragged her focus. Hayes was down on one knee, blood spreading dark across his arm, his rifle clattering from his grip. He clutched the notebook he always carried, pages fluttering loose, sketches torn into the dirt. "Hayes is hit," someone shouted. Leila's chest constricted. Her scope snapped to the source, a man in the corner tower, muzzle flashing. She squeezed the trigger. The sniper crumpled. Hayes dragged himself behind cover, pale, shaking. "Overwatch just saved my life," he gasped into comms, voice broken. But the words didn't feel like victory. They felt like weight, because while she saved one, she was letting another, the target, slip further into myth. The boy tugged at the man's sleeve now, frightened. She saw the child's lips move, though the storm of gunfire swallowed his words. The man leaned down, whispered something back, then guided him slowly toward the rear gate. Her chance was vanishing. Rourke's voice roared, "Marquez, do not let him leave. Do you understand me? Do not." She steadied the scope, breath trembling. This was the moment her entire war had led to. But her mind was a battlefield too. She heard her sister's voice. "Don't ever let them see you scared, Lay." She heard Hayes's words from earlier. "I want to see a bird alive in the morning." She heard her own silence, the silence she'd carried for years, the silence of the dead who never spoke again. And she froze. Her shadow stretched long across the mountain rock, a shadow that trembled as she did. "Marquez," Rourke's voice cracked like thunder, "take the shot." Her finger pressed, the trigger reached the breaking point. And then, a roar split the night, not gunfire, not voices, an explosion. The ground shuddered beneath her as fire erupted from within the compound. The shockwave rattled her scope, threw dust into her eyes. She blinked, coughed, tried to steady. When the smoke cleared, the courtyard was chaos, bodies scattered, walls crumbled, screams tore through comms. And the man, the target, was gone. Her stomach dropped. The gate at the far end of the compound swung wide, swinging on broken hinges. No sign of him, no sign of the boy. Only absence. Her headset filled with overlapping voices. "We're hit. 2 down, maybe 3. We need a vac now." Leila's hands trembled against the rifle. She had him, the ghost, the monster, and she'd let him vanish into the smoke. Rourke's voice cut through, raw, furious. "Overwatch, what the hell happened? You had him." She opened her mouth, but words wouldn't come. Her throat closed, strangled by guilt. In the silence, the truth hung heavy. She had failed. The firefight dragged on. She kept shooting mechanically, covering her team as they pulled the wounded back. Her rifle did its work, but her soul did not. Every shot was hollow, stripped of meaning. At last the order came. "Fall back, evac point now." The team staggered out of the ruins, carrying their injured, their dead. Hayes limped, supported by another soldier, his notebook clutched to his chest like a lifeline. His face was pale, but his eyes sought hers, searching for something: reassurance, reason, hope. She gave him none. She couldn't. The helicopters thundered in, blades whipping the smoke into frenzy. The team scrambled aboard. Leila climbed last, eyes locked on the gate where the target had vanished. Her shadow stretched across the deck as the chopper lifted, torn away by the wind. No cheers, no triumph, only silence. Inside, the men sat slumped, faces blank, bodies broken. Hayes stared down at his notebook, hand trembling as he tried to draw despite the pain. Rourke sat across from her, eyes like steel, jaw clenched so hard the muscles twitched. Finally he spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You had one job, Captain." The words hit harder than any bullet. She didn't answer. She couldn't explain the war raging inside her, couldn't tell him that the boy's eyes had stopped her more than the man's face, couldn't confess that she feared losing herself more than she feared losing the mission. So she stayed silent. The helicopter roared into the night, carrying them away from the compound, away from the failure. But Leila knew the shadow she carried would not be left behind. It would follow her. It always did. And somewhere in the dark mountains below, a man and a child were disappearing into history. Why was no one speaking on the flight back? The helicopter's cabin was filled with sound, blades chopping the air, engines screaming, the metal frame rattling with every gust of wind. But inside, among the soldiers, there was only silence, a silence louder than any gunfire. Leila sat rigid, her rifle across her knees. Smoke clung to her uniform, dust caked in her hair. Her ears still rang with the explosion that had torn the compound apart. But it wasn't the blast she couldn't escape. It was the image of a man and a child disappearing into the dark. Her hands itched with memory. She could still feel the weight of the trigger beneath her finger. She had been seconds away, seconds from ending him, seconds from avenging her sister. And she hadn't done it. Across from her, Hayes slumped against the bulkhead, his arm wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. His face was pale, but his eyes were open, fixed on the sketchbook trembling in his lap. He was drawing again, the pencil shaking against the paper. Leila caught glimpses of lines: a bird in flight, wings stretched wide. His breathing hitched with pain, but he kept drawing as though the act itself was keeping him alive. Beside him, another soldier sat stone-faced, cradling the helmet of a man who hadn't survived. The helmet was cracked, streaked with soot. He stared at it as though starring might bring the wearer back. And then there was Major Rourke. He sat hunched, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the floor. His jaw worked silently, grinding, chewing on fury he hadn't unleashed yet. When his gaze lifted, it locked on her, cold, hard, unblinking. No words passed between them, but his silence was louder than any accusation. The helicopter landed in a storm of dust. They disembarked without ceremony, moving like ghosts. Medics rushed to take the wounded. Stretchers carried the still forms of the dead. The airfield floodlights painted the scene in harsh white, every shadow sharp and merciless. Leila followed, steps slow, her body moving but her mind anchored in that courtyard. She should have felt relief at being alive. Instead, she felt hollow. The debriefing room was small, windowless, suffocating. She sat at the end of a long table, still in her gear, her rifle locked away outside. The walls seemed too close, the ceiling too low. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly pale. Across from her sat two intelligence officers, faces stern, not soldiers but bureaucrats in pressed uniforms. Between them lay a file, thick, heavy. She knew whose name was inside. One of them, a man with sharp glasses, leaned forward. "Captain Marquez, we've reviewed preliminary reports. You had visual confirmation of the target. Why didn't you take the shot?" The words landed like a hammer. Her mouth opened, but nothing came. Her throat was dry, her mind a blur of excuses she couldn't bring herself to speak. She saw the boy's face again. The trembling shoulders, the innocence caught between monsters. Finally, she said, there was a civilian, a child, directly beside him. The officer didn't flinch. Collateral damage was acceptable, you knew that. Her stomach twisted. Acceptable. A child's life reduced to paperwork. She clenched her fists against the table, nails biting her palms. Another voice, flat, almost bored. Your hesitation allowed the target to escape. That failure cost lives tonight. Do you understand the gravity of this? Her chest burned. She wanted to shout, to explain, to tear open her own chest and show them the war raging inside her. But all that came out was a whisper. "Yes." Rourke's voice cut from the corner. She hadn't realized he was there until he spoke, gravel rough. She had him, she froze. The officers nodded, scribbling notes detached. But his words, they stabbed deeper than any reprimand. She didn't defend herself. How could she? The truth was simple. She had frozen. When they dismissed her, she walked out numb, her boots echoing down the empty corridor. Outside, the night was still. The base was quiet, save for the distant hum of generators and the occasional clatter of metal. She wandered until she found herself at the edge of the airstrip, where the lights ended and the desert began. The stars above were sharp, cold pinpricks of light. She stood there staring up, feeling impossibly small. Her sister had loved stars. She used to sit on the rooftop, pointing out constellations, telling stories about them like they were old friends. Leila remembered one in particular, Orion. "The hunter," her sister had said. "He never stopped searching." Leila had become a hunter too, but tonight she'd lost her prey. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. Soldiers didn't cry where others could see. Footsteps approached softly. She didn't turn. "You're not the first to hesitate." It was Rourke. His voice was quieter now, stripped of anger. He came to stand beside her, staring out into the desert. "I've seen it before," he continued. "Hell, I've done it before. You think you're ready to make the impossible choice, but then the impossible stares back, and suddenly you're human again." Leila said nothing. He exhaled, long and heavy. "Problem is, being human gets people killed, and command doesn't forgive that." The silence stretched. Finally she asked, voice barely audible, "Would you have taken the shot?" Rourke's jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the horizon. "I like to think I would have, but the truth, I don't know." He glanced at her then, and for the first time she saw not fury but something else. Weariness, regret. "I've carried ghosts longer than you've been alive, Marquez, and they don't get lighter." Then he walked away, leaving her with the stars. Hours passed. She didn't move. Her shadow stretched and shifted under the floodlights, her only companion in the silence. When dawn finally crept over the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold, she felt no warmth. Only the cold weight of failure pressed harder against her chest. But in that stillness something stirred. Not forgiveness, not peace, just a fragile ember. Because if he had escaped, then he was still out there. The war wasn't over, and neither was her fight. Her shadow remained at her side, heavy, silent, but still there. And she realized, as long as it followed her, she still had a chance to make things right. The desert at dawn had no mercy. It burned the eyes with light, blinded the soul with emptiness, and stretched silence so wide it swallowed even the sound of thought. Leila stood at the perimeter fence, her hand wrapped around cold wire, watching the horizon bleed into orange. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the child's face, pale and trembling, beside the man she should have killed. Behind her, the base was waking. Engines rumbled, boots clattered against gravel, voices barked orders. Soldiers moved with precision, but she felt detached from them, an island adrift in a sea of uniforms. The debrief hadn't left her. Words like failure, hesitation, escape, collateral still echoed in her head. Rourke's silence had cut deeper than any reprimand. Hayes' blood had stained her gloves. The cracked helmet had stared back at her from a stretcher. She clenched her jaw. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Marquez. The voice pulled her back. She turned. Major Rourke stood a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back. His face was carved from stone, unreadable. Briefing room now. Her stomach tightened. Orders, not an invitation. The briefing room was colder than the desert. A projector hummed, casting a map across the wall, satellite imagery of jagged mountains, valleys carved like scars and dots marked in red. At the table sat intelligence officers, their faces tense. And at the far end, leaning heavily on a crutch, was Hayes. He looked up when she entered. His eyes were tired, but they held something the others didn't. No judgment, no accusation, just quiet understanding. His sketchbook lay closed in front of him, but a pencil tapped against its cover like a restless heartbeat. Rourke gestured to the map. Our target resurfaced. Her chest tightened. The man, the ghost she hadn't killed. He's moved north, Rourke continued. Satellite picked up activity at a mountain stronghold here, remote, heavily fortified, but this, his finger tapped the screen, this is where we end it. The officers shifted. One spoke, voice flat. You expect her to lead after last time. His eyes flicked toward Leila, sharp with doubt. The words stung, but before she could speak, Rourke cut in. Yes, I do. Silence filled the room. Captain Marquez made a call, Rourke said. His tone was hard but not cruel. She hesitated. It cost us. But I'd rather a soldier who carries the weight of choice than one who pulls the trigger blind. This mission needs both precision and restraint. She's the one to lead it. Leila swallowed. His trust was a blade, sharp, double-edged. The officer leaned back, skeptical. If she fails again, the consequences will be catastrophic. Rourke's eyes flicked to her. She won't. The briefing moved forward, but she barely heard the words. Her heart pounded with every detail. Infiltration routes through the ravine, drone surveillance schedules, extraction points marked in fragile circles. Each risk painted the mission in shades of blood. When it ended, the officers filed out, their faces a mix of doubt and indifference. Rourke lingered, then left too, leaving only her and Hayes. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling through gritted teeth. Well, he said, voice hoarse, looks like you're back in the fire. She sat across from him, elbows on her knees. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the projector filled the silence. Finally, she asked, do you think I should lead this? Hayes studied her, then gave a small shrug. Do I think you're perfect? No. Do I think you're haunted? Yeah, but haunted doesn't mean broken. Haunted means you've got something to fight for. His fingers traced the edge of his sketchbook. He flipped it open and slid it toward her. Inside was a drawing, the bird he had been working on in the helicopter. Its wings were spread wide, but not in flight. It was perched on a crumbling ledge, eyes sharp, waiting. It's you, he said softly. Not soaring yet, but watching, waiting for the right moment. Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck. Instead, she closed the sketchbook gently and pushed it back. That night, preparation consumed her, cleaning her rifle, checking gear, memorizing every contour of the map. Yet even in the silence of her bunk, her shadow lingered. Long, dark, stretching across the floor like it wanted to remind her, I'm still here. She thought of her sister again. The rooftop, the stars, Orion the hunter. The words she'd whispered years ago, he never stopped searching. By dawn, her resolve was steel. The team assembled at the airfield. Engines roared as a transport plane prepared for takeoff. Soldiers checked weapons, adjusted straps, exchanged brief nods. Leila moved among them, helmet under her arm. Eyes followed her, some skeptical, some cold, a few quietly supportive. She ignored them. Rourke approached, his expression unreadable as always. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Coordinates, he said, and something else. She unfolded it. Beneath the numbers was a single line, written in his sharp hand. Don't chase ghosts, hunt the living. Their eyes met. He gave a single nod, then walked away. Hayes limped toward her, gear slung awkwardly over his good shoulder. She frowned. You're not cleared for field duty. He grinned faintly, and yet here I am. You can barely walk. Doesn't mean I can't see. Doesn't mean I can't draw. Someone's got to keep record of what happens out there. Besides, his voice softened. You're not going into this alone. Something shifted in her chest. She didn't want to admit how much she needed that. The ramp dropped. The team filed in. Leila stepped last, her boots hitting the steel with a finality that echoed in her bones. The engines thundered. The desert shrank beneath them. Ahead, the mountains rose, jagged teeth waiting to bite. Leila sat in the roar of the aircraft, rifle across her lap, heart steady now. She wasn't just chasing a shadow anymore. She was hunting. And this time, she would not hesitate. Why did the wind feel like it was carrying voices? Leila pressed herself against the cold rock face, scanning the ridgeline ahead. The mountain rose before them like a jagged wall, its peaks shrouded in mist. The team moved slowly, every step calculated. Gravel shifted under boots, echoing too loudly in the silent pre-dawn. Every noise could be their last. Hayes struggled beside her, crutch scraping against stone. His breaths came in shallow gasps. I'm fine, he whispered. His voice cracked, betraying exhaustion and fear. She didn't answer. Words could be dangerous here. She only nodded, eyes forward, heart pulsing in rhythm with the mountain itself. The cold cut through their uniforms. Fingers went numb, rifles slick with condensation. Every step was a negotiation with gravity. Loose stones tumbled down slopes. Somewhere below, unseen, a creek hissed over rocks, water rushing like urgent whispers. Leila's shadow stretched along the cliffside, long and dark in the weak light. She could feel it, heavy, waiting, reminding her that she wasn't alone, not in purpose, not in memory. Patrols up ahead, she whispered, barely moving her lips. The team froze. Rourke's eyes scanned the slope above them. He gave a subtle nod. They adjusted silently, moving like shadows among shadows, keeping low, making no sound beyond the scrape of boots on stone. A branch snapped. Every soldier's head snapped toward the noise. Leila's pulse jumped, fingers tightening around her rifle. But it was just a goat, startled by their presence. The tension didn't ease, it multiplied. Minutes stretched into hours. The climb was slow. Fatigue pressed into muscles like a vice. Hayes fell behind, swearing under his breath each time his crutch slipped. Leila kept glancing back, every time expecting to see him gone, but he endured. The boy who had sketched birds in a helicopter now climbed cliffs like a silent promise. They reached a ledge overlooking the enemy stronghold. Leila crouched, scanning through her binoculars. The compound lay nestled in a natural bowl of mountains, walls reinforced with steel and stone. Guards moved along ramps, rifles cradled. Lights flickered. The child she had seen before was nowhere in sight. "Too quiet," Rourke muttered beside her. She felt it too, the calm before the storm. Her stomach churned. She could hear the wind, the rustle of cloth, the hum of distant generators. Every detail felt amplified, almost alive. "Entry point," she whispered. Rourke pointed to a drainage tunnel barely visible in the mist. "Old irrigation channel. Could be tight, could be booby-trapped, but it's our best chance." Leila nodded. Her shadow merged with the rocks beneath them, a silent witness. They began the descent into the tunnel. Darkness swallowed them immediately. Only the faint beam of her flashlight guided the team. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of mold and minerals. Every footstep echoed. Every heartbeat was loud. Halfway through, the tunnel narrowed. Hayes muttered, I can't fit." Leila stopped, evaluating. The walls were slick, the ceiling low, the weight of the mountain pressed down. "You'll get through," she whispered, voice steady, though her own fear was tight in her chest. "We move together, one at a time." He nodded, taking a deep breath. Slowly, painstakingly, he wriggled through. Sweat ran down his temples, staining his hair. She waited, tension coiling like a spring, until he emerged on the other side, pale but intact. Outside, the mountain seemed endless. A thin layer of fog had settled. Every shadow looked like a sniper, every ridge like a threat. Leila crouched, scanning for patrols, calculating angles of approach. A sudden metallic clang echoed from the compound below. They froze. Two guards emerged from a stairwell, rifles slung casually, unaware. Leila adjusted her position, whispering instructions. The team moved like a silent tide, rifles raised but triggers cold, waiting. The men passed beneath them without noticing the shadows above. Leila exhaled slowly. Her hands shook slightly. The calm precision required every ounce of focus she could muster. As they moved closer, the target's presence loomed. She remembered the boy. She remembered hesitation. She remembered the weight of choice. The thought made her fists clench. Hours later, they reached the compound wall. Leila knelt, examining the climb. It was sheer but not impossible. She found small handholds and footholds, mapping a path. "Cover me," she whispered. The team spread out, watching, rifles trained. She began the climb. Each movement was deliberate, testing balance, listening for the faintest shift of rock. Behind her, Hayes climbed more slowly, every movement careful, every breath measured. Halfway up, a loose stone dislodged. It tumbled, clattering against the wall. She froze, heart hammering. Below, a guard looked up instinctively, then shrugged and returned to his post. The team held their breath. When she reached the top, she exhaled, relief fleeting. She dropped into the shadows of the wall, rifle raised. The courtyard stretched before them. She could see guards packing, lights reflecting off windows, doors slightly ajar. Somewhere, faintly, she thought she heard the softest sound of movement, a child. Her heart stopped, the boy. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. They had a mission. Lives were at stake. The past could not dictate the present. Rourke's voice came softly through comms. "Position secured." "Secured," she whispered, eyes on the courtyard. Every muscle tensed, every sense alert. Minutes stretched into eternity. The team waited, shadows merging with the night. Leila's finger hovered near the trigger. She remembered hesitation. She remembered failure. She vowed silently, not this time. She checked her watch. Timing was perfect. "Move on my mark," she whispered. The shadows shifted. The mountain held its breath. Leila Marquez's shadow stretched across the compound, silent, patient, ready. Why did it feel like the mountain itself was watching? Leila crouched at the edge of the compound's roof, wind biting through her uniform, eyes scanning. Below, the courtyard lay stretched in shadow and dim light. Guards moved in slow patterns, oblivious to the predators above. Somewhere in the maze of walls and buildings, the target waited. Her rifle was cold against her cheek. Her finger hovered. Every heartbeat reminded her of the last mission hesitation. The child, the man who had slipped away, the lives lost because of delay. Not this time. Positions, she whispered into the calm. Secured, Rourke replied. Team in place on your mark. Hayes was beside her, crutch tucked aside. Despite the pain in his arm, his hands rested lightly on his rifle, eyes sharp, scanning the ground like a bird of prey. She gave him a brief nod. He returned it, silent but steady. The descent was swift, precise. Shadows stretched across walls and rooftops, merging with her shadow, hiding them from prying eyes. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. Then she saw him. The target, the man who had haunted their mission files, the ghost she hadn't killed before. He moved with careful, deliberate calm, stepping from one shadow to another. And there, just behind him, the boy. Her chest tightened, time slowed. He noticed nothing, not the shadows, not the team, not her presence. Leila's heart screamed. The child should have been hidden. He shouldn't be here. And yet he was. Innocence once again caught between predators. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Her mind raced. If I fire, I end him. If I wait, he vanishes. If I hesitate, I protect the child. Rourke's voice cut through her thoughts. Decision is yours. No one else can take it for you. A single shot could end months of hunting. A single shot could erase the ghost. But at what cost? The man turned suddenly. Something had alerted him. Leila froze, breath caught. The child's small hand squeezed the man's sleeve. And then, for the first time, the man spoke. Do it, he said low, almost mocking, or leave and live with your choice. Her body went rigid. His eyes locked on hers, piercing, testing. Memories of her sister flashed, the birthday, the laughter, the screams, the child, the last mission, failure. She exhaled slowly, made a decision. Hayes, she whispered. He nodded instantly. They had trained for this, communication without words. She fired once. The bullet struck the rifle in the target's hand, knocking it aside. Sparks flew. He stumbled, but not enough to fall. The team advanced, silent, precise. Leila fired again, this time taking a careful, controlled shot. The target dropped to a knee, still alive but disarmed. The child ran, guided gently by Hayes, safe. Relief collided with adrenaline in a harsh wave through her body. The courtyard erupted. Guards noticed too late. The team moved like a tide, neutralizing threats with precision. Leila covered each angle, her rifle a silent extension of her will. And then silence. The target lay at her feet, breathing raggedly, defeated. She lowered her rifle. No triumph swelled in her chest, only exhaustion, relief, and something heavier, the weight of choice, carried like a shadow that never left. Rourke approached, eyes hard, then softened slightly. You did it, he said. Not a praise, not a reprimand, a statement. Hayes knelt beside the boy, checking him over, whispering reassurances. Leila watched. She felt a tremor in her chest, something like hope stirring. The extraction team arrived. They bound the target, secured the compound, and began the slow march back through the mountains. Every step was tense, every glance alert, but the worst was over. In the helicopter, she sat with the boy in Hayes' arms. He clung quietly, eyes wide but unafraid now. The hum of the rotors filled the cabin. Rourke sat across from her, silent. After a long pause, he said, sometimes, Mark, it's not about taking the shot. It's about knowing when not to. Leila nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel like a failure. She felt human. The shadow she carried seemed lighter now, though still present. A silent companion that whispered of memory and responsibility. Back at base, the mission was debriefed. Praise was sparse, tempered by the cost, but the files would show success. Lives saved, the target in custody, the boy unharmed. Leila walked alone later across the quiet base. The sun was low, washing the desert in gold. Her shadow stretched behind her, long, loyal, constant. She stopped at the edge of the tarmac, looking at the mountains where the battle had begun. She exhaled. The wind caught her hair, the dust, the silence, and she understood something she hadn't before. Dignity didn't speak, it simply acted. Every choice, every hesitation, every step forward in the dark had been hers, and it had mattered. She turned, her shadow at her side, and walked back toward the base, toward the living, carrying history's greatest fight in the quiet lines of her soul.